I'm really over sucking at putting. So over the course of the next 7 days, I'm going to be making just under 7,000 putts, trying to figure out my putter for the 2024 season. And I have bought some, I had some, and then Infinite sent me out some of theirs. So in order to stop sucking at putting, we are going to have the putter wars. So this whole process of choosing my putter for the season did not go as planned. After starting out with all the putters, which I have a lot more down here, we added actually a couple. And I'm gonna kind of walk through everything now because I made a lot of practice putts, but it didn't actually come down to the putting to determine which putter I was gonna be using for the season, at least not the numbers.
I had 10 total sets of putters to get started, and because of that, I wanted to get them all in a bracket. It would be a 3-round tournament where whoever made the most putts moved on, but if it was close, I would be able to decide which putter felt best in my hands. There'd be 200 putts with each putter in round 1, we'd move on to round 2 where there'd be 300 putts each, and then round 3 would be 500 putts each to finally decide a winner.
Just finished the first set. Wow, my stats are abysmal. It is a little humbling to take them.
I think this would be a great way to do this, but you'll see throughout this video why this failed for me. But I did try it and got through basically all of round 1, starting out with the Clash Disc Butter versus the Infinite Disc Alpaca.
So I just finished up the first match, and we're definitely not gonna walk through all of them because it's gonna be the same thing over and over and over again. Coming out of my hand, the butter definitely felt more buttery, for lack of a better. There's a lot of better terms, but it felt much smoother. It's just a little deep, which I was feeling. And then especially when I got out into circle 2, I feel like it's easier for me to spin this and like keep it floaty. Whereas this takes a lot more like oomph with my arm. It took a total, including like little filming times, nothing crazy, like filming didn't take too much. 1 hour and 12 minutes is what this took. So 4 more matchups, so 4 more hours in this round. And then there's 3 matchups in round 2, 3 matchups in the final round, so.
Whew.
Now after that initial day of putting, this actually ended up kicking out the alpacas, and I ran that same style of round where I would putt, I think 200 times with each putter, with most of the putters that we'll have here today, and it eliminated some interesting ones. The butter was gone. The Envy, which I completely forgot to bring out here today because one of them I'm actually throwing in my bag, also lost in a surprising upset to... I'm calling an audible. Numbers are so close that we're sending the Scarab on. I very much did not expect that, but I much prefer putting with it. Wow, interesting. The Scarab from Infinite, which I have in D-line, which honestly surprised me because it's a beaded putter. I think if you're looking for an old Discmania P1X, this is kind of a very similar, if not the exact same mold. So what Simon used to throw as his P1 Ace disc, it's pretty much a Scarab, so go snag those at Infinite if you'd like. But I had a good few more rounds of putting with almost all the putters in here except for these, which were all kind of added along the way. Now, to be completely honest with you, this whole thing I thought was gonna take about a week or 2. I'd finalize my putter and then I'd just start putting with it. But during one of my first initial sessions where I putted a lot, I'd actually said this. The one thing that I did realize or remember is like, this is such a tendon heavy thing, whereas throwing tends to be more musculature heavy. Obviously you need to be springy, you need to have good tendons, but like this is so much just tendons springing open and open and open and open. I'm really gonna have to take this in mind, but as I go throughout the rest of this week, I might have to actually elongate it past 1 week just to make sure that I don't hurt myself doing this too much and rehabbing correctly, not overdoing it at all. Don't want to exacerbate a twinge and turn it into an injury, you know? And unfortunately, I think I was slightly overdoing it, but on top of that, I had kind of massaged some of my tendons, which instead of helping it, actually ended up aggravating it. And so for about another week or week and a half, I was really struggling with any like fine motor rhythms with my wrist, and it was just very tight. The back of my hand was all cramped up, and it put a little bit of a damper on my putting practice. I kind of want to go through all the putters today that I actually went through and decide who they will actually work for or not. I didn't get all this on video because honestly, I just needed to continue practicing putting for the season, and I did make a decision which I was not at all expecting.
We're in the apartment gym. We brought out this basket. Even with the chainsaw installer, dude, it's still so loud. Let me show you this crap. We're now working with the Popcorn versus the Cohort 3.5 speed from Infinite. Kind of like beveled. If you've ever thrown an XD from Innova, pretty much that's what it is. But Popcorn, I've only used 1 putt. I do think being inside has something more to do with it. There's like 6 inches of snow out everywhere. So if I'm gonna rep some putts, we're gonna be doing it in here every night. And hopefully we'll be able to iron out which putters are really flying well for me. And then we can take them out into some wind and see how they react. That's the second putt I missed with that putter. Not that bad, but I don't think I'll be putting if there's anybody else in the gym.
Now real quick before we walk through each and every single one of the putters, the reason why I kind of stopped with putt however many putts with each of these, do a bracket style like I'd initially wanted to, and that I thought would be really fun. One, because of the injury risk I felt, and the not getting good practice in with the putters that I'd actually be putting with, and I didn't think I needed that many reps with each of them to really decide. And then two, the main reason is, frankly, I wasn't a good enough putter and still am not. It's gotten better since I've been practicing more, but I'm not a good enough putter to really have that be a determining factor. My whole goal with this process was knowing that I could take any of these putters in here and become a good putter with them. It's just about reps and practice and then getting confident with that, which comes through reps and practice. I think if you take any of the top players in the game and you give them some random putter and tell them, I'm paying you for 2 or 3 months, you have to putt with this for the next season, I think they can get away with basically any putter. You probably want it to be slightly more overstable than understable, which is the main reason why I'm going away from the pures, because once the wind picks up, the nose angle becomes super dependent, and throwing from circle 2, they sometimes can flip, and I just want something that'll hold on a hyzer. It doesn't have to dump, but I don't want to worry about it flipping up in a headwind too much. Like, I would be able to hyzer flip these. So knowing that I wasn't a good enough putter to actually have this be data that is useful, because one day I might just be better at putting than another day, and it won't really be on too much of the putters, I sought out to find the putter that fit the best in my hand and that released the cleanest most often. Initially, I wasn't super interested in having beaded putters be a part of the mix, except for maybe the Discmania Link. This is an Exo Soft plastic, which I definitely prefer a harder plastic. I honestly don't think I'm a beaded putter guy. I understand that there is some consistent fade that you can get from that, and a lot of people like it, but I think bead versus no bead isn't the most important thing. When you look at the top putters and players in the game, there isn't a consistent bead versus no bead. Like, Gannon is a big bead guy, and he tells me that I need to putt with a bead. But then you look at Andrew Marby, #1 player on tour, I'm pretty sure he putts with a steady BL. But a lot of the top guys don't necessarily putt with one or the other. It's just whatever they're comfortable with. So the Link I did like, but the bead, I kept finding it would catch on my hand a little weird because I'm not used to it. I'm used to a very low profile disc in the pure, which I still was putting pretty well with, but I knew that's because I had such good muscle memory with it. But I lost a lot of confidence as the wind picks up, and there are just windy rounds when you're playing in Colorado, and now I'm getting ready for Waco. So this one was out as well. One that kind of got added to the lineup later is the Pixel and the Nomad. These ones were sent out to me for the Pixel review. Shout out Infinite. But the Nomad is slightly beaded on the bottom. Just was a little bit overstable, and a lot of people like it, but it is a little deeper dish. Eagle really likes this because it's very similar to Rainmakers. And then you have Simon's new disc, the Pixel, that came out, which is kind of like if you have a P1X and a P2 and an Atom maybe, I don't know, and they all have a baby, you get this disc. And it's really good, really point and shoot, a little deep for my hands, and has a bead, and I putt fine with it, but it's just not really what I'm most comfortable with. It does have a little bit deeper of a profile. So this one also was more just for the review, but I did want to throw it in here and try it out on the putting green to see if it's what I actually wanted. Now let's kind of get into all of the Infinite putter lineup, because they make a lot of putters, and honestly, I don't know if I'm going to be bagging any of them this season, which has nothing to say about this and everything to say about me, because discs are all preference, and luckily being on Infinite, I only have one contractually obligated mold that I need to bag from them, and I love a lot more than one of their discs. Just doesn't happen to be any putters right now. Infinite has a lot of good putter plastics. A lot of them are different Innova plastics. The N blend, like I have in these alpacas here. Tombs, like I have, well, that's a Myth. This is a Tomb, and this is a Cohort. It's like the Nexus blend. It's probably my preferred putter plastic from them right now. They also have X blend, which is like XT, R blend, which is like R Pro, P blend, which I think is like KC Pro plastic, and D blend, which is like DX. So the N blend discs that I had here were these alpacas that have my first announcement Bonanza stamp on them. I could putt well with these, and I could throw them well, but the release was inconsistent. And like a lot of these, it's just about what I am the most confident with in the moment. Because my thought process is, I'm a bad putter right now, or I have been a bad putter historically. I have to get back to being a good putter again. And so I want to give myself the biggest leg up. And since putting is so much confidence on top of having solid mechanics, which I know I have good muscle memory in there somewhere from when I used to be a good putter, I'm going to want to use the disc that when I put it in my hands, I have the most confidence with it off the bat, that I will get a clean release, a consistent release, and it has the glide, stability, everything that I want the flight-wise to get myself the best chance of getting it into the basket. Like I said earlier, anybody can putt with anything, but I feel like it's starting from like baseline 0 if I go ahead and put, for instance, one of the less comfortable discs in my hand, unfortunately, the Tomb, because it's actually so shallow and has a bead on it, that if I put this in my hand, I kind of don't know exactly where it's going to release out of, because it's so thin that I feel like I have to impart more grip onto it to keep it in my hand until my release point. And so putting something like this in my hand, honestly kind of similar to the Link, I just really didn't get along with it very well. I know Gannon likes that, but those kind of were at like down at base level where I can get good with them, but it's going to take a lot of practice to build that confidence up. Whereas if I put a disc in my hand and I just like the feel, it releases cleanly very consistently, I like the flight of it, it's going to start me kind of here rather than starting it down here and having to work up to this point, and I can can work from a higher baseline. The Tomb, unfortunately, didn't make it. The Alpaca, I really wanted to be it. It just was a little too deep for my hands. It's very similar to a Firefly or an older Discmania P2 mold, and I think I could get away with it, especially as a lot of like my wrist tendinosis or tendinopathy, whatever, long-term tendinitis in my wrists, it's kind of gone away a lot really recently. And so I think I could definitely get away with it, but it just doesn't fit my hand as comfortably, which I think a lot honestly has to do with the high shoulder, which we'll get to when we talk about the putter I decided to go with for the season. Next are the cohorts, which are very interesting. I'm pretty sure it's like an Innova XD mold, has a pretty large bevel, but is still very shallow. So I actually putted all right with these, but the large bevel leading to a point was a little bit less consistent than having a little more material down here for my fingers to grip onto and putt out. The raise, I kind of wanted to like, it's AVR X3 like, and it was fine. It was very overstable though, very dumpy, and I felt like I had to give it a lot to get the glide that it needed to get to the basket. So even though this is probably the most comfortable in my hand out of the Infinite discs, it did not do the best for me. The Myth, I thought I was going to be putting with for a while because it was a little more comfortable than the Alpaca in my hand. It did have a slight bead. People have mentioned to me that this is likely something like a whale mold from Innova. I know that there are some players on tour who do really like it. Didn't putt with it well at all. I just kept missing, and it was always coming out left, so had to not be getting a really clean spin, which I think does have partially to do with the bead. But that being said, what really surprised me were the scarabs. Like I said, they kicked the envy out of Putter Wars when I was actually fully doing it, and I liked the way that they just rode straight with a lot of glide, and instead of dumping, they just kind of fell on a hyzer instead of pushing left, which the envies really like to push left, kind of more mid-like. I was surprised by how much I really like the scarab for putting, but I didn't like it enough. It's still a little bit deep, still does have that bead, which I'm not as comfortable with, and so I put it in my hand, and I do like it, but I don't love it as much as kind of these last ones, which were the discs that I was really thinking were going to be fighting for that slot, and you guys have seen probably in recent videos. And one thing that you're going to notice from these discs, which I do want to be upfront with because I like being like very honest with everything that I do with my channel, especially because I know some people have aspirations to do stuff that's similar to me and my channel. Most of these companies are companies that are either smaller or I have good relationships with, which partially is like a business decision. If I have a good relationship with a company, then a lot of times they will send me out discs for my bag because they know that they're going to get a lot of representation with them and very cheap marketing. And the first one of these that I thought was going to be it was the Discmania Logic. I got one of these from my buddy Josh, and I putted really well with these. They're very round, they're very similar to the Latitude 64 Pure. Eggs, but just have a little bit more stability and are nice and round, which I thought I was actually gonna like. Turns out, kind of not the case. There's another disc that I got in late to the competition that I thought actually was gonna take its spot, and then I thought the Logic took it back because of a couple days of putting. But it was interesting because there are actually days when my wrist was flaring up the worst, and so I could use the least amount of wrist, and so I was like spinning them just like that, and like it was doing well, and I was putting well with them. But then when I got healthy again, they started to not putt as well as with some of these other ones. But Logic, I think, was definitely a front runner. I really thought I was going to be putting with this, have a good relationship with Discmania. The rest of these are smaller companies where not only do I maybe have a good relationship with them, but on top of that, there might be the opportunity for a signature putter. And so that is obviously in my mind, and I try not to let it be biased, which is why I went through and putted with all these from all these different companies, trying to get the best one for my game. But if a couple of them are close, it would literally only make sense for me to do one that's going to be brand and financially rewarding for me. So the next two actually come from Clash Discs. We have the Clash Disc Butter and the Clash Disc Popcorn. These are honestly pretty similar, and a lot of people are going to say, what about the Candy? Because that's very similar numbers to the Pure from Clash, recently came out. And I was actually at Fly Green, a local shop down here in Denver, and they had all these, and I felt all of them. And the Candy, I just didn't like in the hand. It felt a little too round and a little deeper than the Pures and a little smaller. The Popcorn is interesting because it feels wider diameter. So this is what I was putting with for a while. It has a really good glide, is rounder, and because it's a little wider and shallower than the Logic, the roundness, it's like, you feel like there's more here. I don't know why. Literally don't know, but it feels like there's more there, so it felt a little bit comfortable and more clean spin. Has really good glide, but that sometimes made it a little too glidey where it wouldn't really get a fade or a drop, which some people are going to like. I kind of am working with more of a mixed spin push weirdo putt. I'm actually going to probably be straddle for the season, which we'll talk about at the end of this video. But this one I liked, and I thought it was going to be it, but it just turned out to lose out to these next couple that we'll talk about. The Butter I really liked as well, but I honestly, going back to the Putter Wars thing, I would putt it against other ones, and I just miss more. And the more putts you miss with a putter, the less you're going to want to putt with it. And so I like it. Feels good. It feels honestly a little bigger in the hand, and the shoulder here ever so slightly. When you look at the shoulder right here, and you think about this finger doing a lot of extending to get that last little pop on your hand, this is kind of the pad of this muscle right here is kind of where a lot of that happens. If you hold something here and you flex it, it's going to be a little impinged, but if it's something here and you flex it, you're going to get a little more range of motion. And so putters that have a little bit bigger or higher shoulders are a little less comfortable for me in my really small, admittedly baby hands, because the higher the shoulder and the more it impinges into that, the less range of motion I feel like I can get from that index finger, which helps to impart a good amount of spin. But the last two were the last additions to my lineup, and I thought there was no way that these were going to win it out. And it honestly came down to these two. The logic was kind of with these in the last three. Popcorn you could add on top of it for the last four. But these two were battling it out for the end. The last couple were the RPM Takapu and the Birdie Disc Golf Supply Marvel. Both of these are much more traditional AVR style putters, similar to the Alpaca. And if you guys remember me putting with the Alpaca, I said I would love to putt with the Alpaca if they shrunk it down a little bit. And that's very similar to kind of what these two seem to be trying to emulate. Let's first take a quick look at the Takapu from RPM Discs. If you see the shoulder, it's a little more round there, especially as compared to kind of the bluntness of the Alpaca. It's kind of like if you took this disc, flatten out the shoulder and add a little spacer, you would get the Alpaca, because it definitely is slightly shallower as well. There's a bevel on it as well right here, which kind of curves down, and that actually provides a decent place for your finger to rest. And I kind of putt with this grip, where these fingers are slightly curved in the back, and this one rests on the lip of the putter, and then on that knuckle, it just kind of spins off of it. I really like how these kind of spun off my fingers. I like the glide, I like the stability. I got the Magma Hards here, I believe, or the hard putting plastic, which I realized as long as it's tacky, I really prefer a harder putting plastic because it just spins off my finger a little bit better. And the other putter that I was between was the Birdie Disc Golf Supply Marvel. Kind of have the same pattern of stamp right here, which is kind of funny. But here we can see they're at least relatively similar. They both have a rounder top, especially as compared to something like the Alpaca. Now, I've been told that the Marvel was basically just a P2, that they like took the P2 mold and they just like spat out another one and just rebranded it as the Marvel. I was very glad to find that that was not the case. The P2 is much more similar to this. And this, it seems like they have really rounded over this shoulder, which exactly comes down to the point where it fits into this top part of my hand without impinging the index finger. On top of it, the bevel is honestly slightly larger than the Takapu, which I didn't really think I would like. You can kind of see how much wider that one is when you kind of take the space between this knuckle, and for me, when I place it right on this disc, it is very close to perfect. It fits very well in my hands, and I can get some pretty good spin. It's also pretty shallow and very straight. I thought they would have a lot more fade. They don't have a lot of fade, but they do have like stability, so they're torque resistant. You can really kind of jam them at the basket, very similar to the Takapus. And honestly, a lot of it just came down to Birdie was one of the first companies to ever pay me to like review discs, and so I'm gonna be putting with the Marvel this year. Right now it's gonna be in this stiff blend. They actually sent me a ton of them, so massive shout out and thank you to Birdie. We just had a good relationship, and they have a putter that is as good, if not better, than every other putter that I putted with, and I'm definitely feeling more confident the more I practice and putt with it, and having something in my hand that starts me off more confident than almost all of these. I'm not going to say all of them, because I bet it could be this or the Logic or the Takapu. Probably not the Popcorn because of that extra glide, but any of those three, I bet if I just chose those and repped them out and had a bunch of them, I would be more than happy. But a company that supported me for a while, and that maybe there would be the opportunity again, like I said, for some sort of signature at some point, whether that's a blend of plastic or just a stamp or something. We'll see what ends up happening, but the Marvel is going to be it for this year, and I'm throwing some of them as well, and I like how they fly. I have some pretty beat-in ones. Hyzer Flip for me, I have some, the like premium ones are pretty overstable. I know Scott putted with the Marvel actually after doing his putter wars, and his was like, yeah, it's because of the data, and I'm like, I'm not good enough to have good data, so it was just the comfort factor for me. And I'm sure a part of that is the bias towards the company, which I'm going to be very upfront about. Like, I'm not here to tell you that you need to choose any of these putters, because it's so individual. And what happened with me and why I putted so well with the Pure that first year that I started playing in 2022 is I went to a store. I loved Latitude 64, so biased there already because of Jonathan and his YouTube content. Was creating YouTube videos before I started this channel. Just loved what he was doing. Basically got me into disc golf, so I picked out a Fuse, some Pures, and I think a Rock 3. And the Pure was just a putter that felt the best in my hand. In the store, I like putted it back and forth to my wife as if she was a basket. And then I putted with that for like 2 years, basically. Ran a bunch of discs with it. Thank you guys, whoever bought one of those. Putted all right with it just because of confidence and practice. In that first year, I had probably 20 or 30,000 reps of practice. And so this year it's just, okay, I got a bunch of marbles. Let's get tens of thousands of reps of practice in with them, because It's a solid putter, feels good in my hands, I can putt well with it, and that is what has won Putter Wars. Also very similar to what I was talking about with the Pures is why I'm gonna be straddle putting this year. I know this is an interjection, I finished this video and then realized I forgot to talk about this, but I'd been inline putting and trying to inline putt. It was going all right, sometimes a little bit missing to the left. You see, like, it's relatively fine, and I like the weight shift of the inline, and I think overall I'd rather be an inline putter. But when it would come down to pressure situations, or just there would be some days that I was so off, that straddle putting for me, I have such good muscle memory there from when I was a good putter and had done so many thousands, tens of thousands of reps straddle putting. Oh, of course I missed that one. That especially now that I need to go and score, because I'm going to be playing in Waco in 2 weeks, I'm going back to straddle putting for the season while I practice both. Use that good muscle memory that I've had to be the best putter that I can be while I work on both and kind of see what I need to do for 2025. Since this is, again, is a foundational year, I'm trying to build it up while I play some events. That's kind of why I straddle. It's literally just I make more putts under pressure time, and that's it. So back to whatever I was saying. I got some questions about like how to choose a putter, and really my biggest thing is like have something that has some sort of stability, like closer to 0-1. You can get away with -1-1 like the Pures. I putted really well with those for a while, even into headwinds and such. They had really good glide. But something more like a 0-1, 0-2 kind of putter. I like the 2-speed because it's a little slower than like an MB. I really like that, especially for throwing. That's why I have MBs and this in the. We're getting to tomorrow's video. Don't try to cheat and steal that information out of me. But that was not on me. That's not on me, dude. Marvels are in the bag for the year for putting. Shout out Derek for sending me a bunch out. Thank you guys for supporting me this whole time and allowing me to build these relationships with these companies. If you want to snag any Marvels or any of these putters, do it on infinitedisc.com. The whole week is going to be about building and finalizing my bag, and it's getting pretty dang close. Tomorrow is putt, approach disc, and mids. I still have some finalization to do there myself, so hopefully I can figure it out. Okay, see you guys soon.